everyone, and also to the panelists here from all over the world. So as you all know, who's been following us for quite a while as in during lockdown 2 months ago. So we are a community of change makers, and we are all being the change that we want to see in the world. So in this platform, we are reimagining leadership, and leading begins with us, you and I. So as leaders of the future, all of us here in the panels and the ones who are watching, we are leading ourselves, we need to lead ourselves. And also as human beings, because it's humans reimagining leadership, we need to access all the multifaceted nature of who we are as human beings. And the past century, and sometimes even today, we've created such a dysfunctional society because we suppress and shut off those very attributes and emotions and feelings that makes us humans. So I'm very, very delighted to hand over this panel to Lahar. She's based in Mumbai, and we are looking forward to this amazing conversation with so many interesting people from around the world. So Lahar.
Thanks, Radhika. I'm Lahar. I'm really delighted to be here. I have been following future leadership, and I think I really resonate with a lot of what Radhika shared, which also brings me here today. On the panel today, we have Michael, who's in Denver, and we have Ankush, who's in Mumbai. We have Summer, who's in North Carolina, and we have Treyvone from Johannesburg, and Treyvone and Radhika both from Johannesburg, and Diman, who's also from Mumbai, and I think he lives just down the road from me. Really excited to be here. And I will be sharing a little bit about each one of our profiles, and we'll just take it from there. But let me just, I think, begin with just why I love this subject so much. I know that growing up in India and, all of the culture and I guess tradition that comes with it, I have had an ongoing process with understanding patriarchy primarily. And all of my questions around what is the feminine and what is the masculine and where do I fit in on the spectrum began from a fairly early age when I started identifying that I'm looked at differently or treated differently as a woman. And only when I was much older did certain terms come into understanding, like the term patriarchy or like the term masculine or like the term feminine. That only came in much later. But so which is why I've always been curious about ways that we limit or grow through this. So this has been my journey. Thank you for listening. And I'm just going to give a quick introduction and we can move from there. So we have Michael with us. Michael has done his PhD as a professor at the University of Denver's Graduate School of Professional Psychology. And so actually, I was just sharing this with him. The topic came from a really interesting article that Michael wrote on gender is fluid. And while looking up a few more articles, there were actually a few more that were really interesting around the quest to be oneself and how to think of self-esteem. I think all of these are really great topics, and I think they all tie in with the conversations that we aim to have today. So thank you, Michael, for being here. Ankush has been working for several decades, and I've known him from this space with the transgender community in Delhi. And he has his own non-profit called Pehel. And he's particularly also very motivated to be working with youth across villages. And that's also something he does on skill building in youth. And he's very hands-on and very grassroots. And what I love the most about Ankush is he leads from a space of empathy and connection. So he really tries to build connections with the youth that he works with. But today, I'm really excited to hear Ankush's over a decade of experience with the transgender community and how he's worked with that in India. We have Summer. I met Summer for the first time 5 years ago in New York in a dance program. And since then have watched Summer just bloom into so many different personalities. And I see it on social media. And,
thank you, Lahar.
Just a little bit about Summer. So they say they're an Italian-American educator, researcher, and a multidisciplinary artist in process with a full-length feature documentary on their personal journey of belonging to the discovery of the third gender of Southern Italy called the Femininity. Please
Yes.
correct me if I'm wrong at some point.
Yep, that's all correct.
Okay. We have Treyvone. I'm seeing them for the first time, but I absolutely love your Facebook profile and all of the pictures. And Treyvone shared a beautiful little note just before we got on this call. So they share that they've struggled with gender identity most of their life, tied to his assigned gender at birth, and is now completely identified as a non-binary human. And I really love this line, actually. You want to share today about your lived experience as a former man navigating through his femininity and constantly trying to find a balance between the two worlds through a lens of society's eye. Love that line. And we have
Thank you for having me, Lahar.
And we have Dhiman, also a great, I was really excited when I read this. Dhiman says he's a storyteller of all kinds. He's been in the Indian film and television industry for 20 years and worked as a showrunner and executive producer, and focuses to tell stories, and worked in the corporate world of studios and networks, both in and out of the closet. Been out for a while, but there are always expectations even as a queer person. But I love that the focus is to tell stories that empower people. I would love to just begin with Michael sharing a little bit about just decoding some language and terminology, past and present, around this, because like I shared, this whole thing is sort of stemmed from Michael speaking about the difference between sex and gender. So maybe Michael, you could begin with that.
Glad to. Just briefly, it turns out this can be laid at the feet of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the groundbreaking Supreme Court Justice, who is one of my heroes. But she thought that judges overreact to the word sex when she's talking about sex discrimination. So she just used the word gender wherever she meant the word sex. And it got picked up in other places too. And so now it's really hard to distinguish what we mean when we talk about biological sex and what we mean when we talk about gender. And no blame on her, of course, but so much of the future imaginings on my part, at least, and I think on yours, about gender and sex is to unlink them. But when we use the same word for both, it gets confusing. And then the problem with the word sex is it can tell you biologically something about the person, but it's also the word we use for eroticism. And so it's hard to have a conversation about sex without also invoking the entire terminology of eroticism. And then, at some point at level, I feel like this is not an accident. I feel like the patriarchy, I think we might all have a shared understanding of what we mean by that, but the patriarchy gets something out of owning and condemning sex as eroticism, owning and condemning the way you use your body with respect to gender. And so the confusion around terminology also continues the linkage of how we act with what our biology is, which seems arbitrary and unnecessary. One more word about terminology, if I may. I keep trying to think of words to describe what we mean by masculine and what we mean by feminine behavior that don't link those words to sex, but the root of masculine is male and the root of feminine is female. And so for a while I was using yin and yang to talk about masculine energy as yang and feminine performance, I should say, not energy, is yin. But yin and yang don't exactly line up with what most cultures mean by masculine and feminine. So just the fact that there aren't any words for what it means to act masculine and what it means to act feminine that aren't already pre-linked to biological sex is also a window into the problem, in my opinion.
I think that's a really interesting point. It has been a question which has been very alive, which is what really is a masculine and what really is a feminine quality. And I'm actually wondering, Treyvone, maybe if that's something, since that's something you mentioned about navigating your femininity through your journey, it would be really nice. Maybe if you could share something from personal experience.
Something that Michael just said resonated with me, in that the masculine and the feminine is an act, because there are no words to describe what it really is to be masculine and what it really is to be feminine. There is a performative nature to this identity marker that society has decided we need to assume. For me, gender really is multidimensional. It's an expression that I use in how I dress, in how I decide to walk out of the door on any given day. So for me, the finding a balance, because also when we put gender as a binary between 2 points, it means that there's an infinite number between 0 and 1. There are definite infinite possibilities that you could get to just between those 2 binary points. But when we start looking at gender as a binary, I think that's where the problem comes in, because how I live my experience from a day to day changes, and it's based on how I feel. It's an emotive expression. Sometimes it's a performative expression. Sometimes it really just comes down to how that lived existence, that innate feeling that I have. And so gender, I feel, is limiting in saying that there's man and there's woman. And it's why I've assumed sort of this non-binary or gender non-confirming title, and why my pronouns are they and them, is because for me, navigating the world as assigned at birth man became problematic in my adulthood, just because of the various political and socially constructed themes that came with masculinity that I didn't identify with. That gender marker became problematic. But I also then found myself assuming the role of man depending on how or where I was socially, where my femininity I expressed in places where I felt safe, at home, with friends. And so that problem of jumping between, not the problem, the solution of being able to jump between 2 binaries, I found an infinite possibility of expression. And that for me is how I reimagine my own gender, as infinite.
Summer, I was wondering if you could, because I know that you had a similar, I mean, not similar, I'm sure, distinct in your own way, but from where I stand, perhaps a journey that could touch on certain points, like I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. Yeah, there are definite parallels in my experience and Treyvone. Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes.
Treyvone. Yeah, there's definitely parallels in our experiences, and I want to say just first, thank you for organizing this, like to have an international conversation with people represented from like really so many different places around the world. It's affirming in a very special and unique way. So thank you, especially all of you representing the Global South. I know that our experiences tend to be, similar in some ways and very, very different in other ways. And so I want to acknowledge that. In my case, after having worked very intensely on this film project for the past almost 3.5 to 4 years, I've kind of come out on the other side of this identity conversation, having more questions than what I started with. And what I wanted to do in my film project was I wanted to look at all of the different identity categories that I represent on paper. And I wanted to see if I could find the intersection of those inside of my ancestral culture, which is Southern Italian culture. And so in so doing, and going to Italy, finding out about this third gender group called the Femminili, in meeting with my Italian American family to talk about gender or their perspective on my gender, I found that I am no more closer to understanding gender. I don't understand gender. I feel that I am absolutely a soul that has been like birthed into this body, into this world that people view as a gendered construct. And so I struggle with all of the language around it at this point, whereas before I would identify as a trans femme, you know, non-binary femme, or, you know, because I resonated with that which I thought was femininity. But I realized that I don't really think I know what feminine feels like, and I don't really know what masculine feels like. All I know is what people have told me about how these things are defined. And so I liked when Treyvone was talking about, and also Michael talking about gender as almost an action, because in spite of the fact that there are innumerable ways that we can present our gender to the world, viewing it in terms of a binary, for me, even if it's only for myself, is actually quite helpful. Because otherwise it's like, I just have nothing to hold on to. It's like, yeah, I can identify like binary forces in nature that help me to understand like how my actions as a human can be translated into masculine or feminine. You know, for example, like a bee that is like pollinating, you know, different flowers, you know, certain flowers, you know, the stamen versus the pistil, you know, those are two, you know, a masculine and a feminine part of the flower with different purposes. And so I find it helpful to look to nature to understand that which we may describe as sexual identity, but also like use my imagination to decide upon like the genders of it. I mean, it's very complicated, and I also feel like it sometimes gets in the way of just seeing me as a human, because instead people are figuring out what I am or why I'm dressed like that. And it's like, well, why is that relevant to you in the moment? Like, which should be relevant is like, how are we like communicating and connecting to one another, you know? So
Summer,
yeah.
you're mentioning how you're dressed. I was actually going to ask you if you put some thought into what you were going to wear for this. And then I was going to tell you about my thought about what I was going to wear for it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. Well, yeah, since we're on Zoom, it's like top up, right? And I'm going on a little date after this. I'm going on a motorcycle ride, and so I like got dressed for that. And so I'm wearing like a flowy shirt, and I wanted to like adorn the top part of myself, but I couldn't find the other earring that I wanted to wear. And so I wrapped a scarf around my neck.
And it is summer in New York. Unlike
It is.
Treyvone and myself.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, I'm in the
I'm
mountains.
freezing.
Yeah. Look at you all wrapped up. That's so funny.
I just was going to make the point that if you think about what you wear through a gendered lens, it doesn't mean your performance is inauthentic. It just means you're self-reflective and aware. Mm-hmm. And if you don't think about what you're wearing through a gendered lens, it doesn't mean your performance is authentic. It just means you're not thinking.
Right.
Yeah, I love that, you know, but because at certain points, you know, it does require you to I feel like society, in me expressing my gender, that there are certain places where I'm okay with being perceived as more feminine, and there are places in the world where I am required to be perceived as more masculine. And I've just accepted those as a matter of fact. They mean nothing to how I feel in the moment, but it's just society's demand. And that's the fun thing about clothes. I love clothes for that reason. I love shocking people and putting on a dress, and they're just going, WTF, why are they wearing a dress? Or why is he wearing a dress, of course? So that for me is the fun part with gender. And I think that gender should be playful and we should allow people to express it in whichever way or form they want to.
You know, it's like the gendered lens that you're speaking about, Michael, is very complex and it's very complicated because it really varies culture to culture and it also varies person to person. And the ramifications for being outside of the lens also vary from culture to culture and person to person. So it's really not as simple as I feel that I want to present to the world as feminine, and so I'm going to wear this today because, you know, even within the category of feminine, the different ways of presenting femininity kind of elicit different kinds of responses. And so what I mean to say is that, let's say I wanted to wear something that would be considered feminine by, you know, by Western standards, but is also very revealing. If I wanted to wear short shorts and a little tank top or something like that, that is going to elicit a very different response from people than if I were to be wearing a long flowy dress, you know? So there's also the piece of eliciting sexual desire from people that strikes a chord in a very different way than if I wanted to just be feminine and whimsical.
Did you want to ask something?
Yeah, so I have a point. So I was just listening this conversation. So I was thinking 10 years before now, I was not even knowing any difference between gender and sex. So it is really very complicated. And I also took a long time to understand what is sex, what is gender, and how I have to differentiate. Because what is my experience is, who am I, what I have to wear, how I have to behave is decided by society. Because when we were in our childhood, so our parents, our environment, and the society has taught us, okay, you have to behave like this because you are male. And then after some time, because one has to behave in that manner only. So men cannot cry. It's very in our society, it's very common that only girls can cry, but men cannot cry. So, but I associate these things not very much on attire and the external behavior, but I very closely connect those that gender is the inner values, because society has given the layers of different values what we have to behave. But I connect both masculine and feminine with values. I can be caring, I can be very loving also, and I can also be very powerful and strong and also. So I can I create a balance. So this is what I understood after a long time. There is a need of balance.
You know, I'd just like to say that thank you so much for calling me, actually calling all of us. And I'm resonating with each and everything, like one bit of what everybody is saying. I'm actually resonating so strongly with all these points, because somewhere I think, you know, we are conditioned as we grow up, we are conditioned into a certain kind of thinking, into a certain kind of behavior. And being also from India, you're brought up in a certain kind of a manner. And there are all these norms that men are supposed to be like this and women are supposed to be like that. And you go with those qualities and you start taking those acceptance. But something like what Summer is also saying, you know, somewhere between after that, you know, when you start identifying about with your gender or with the gender that you want to identify with, you really, you know, you get lost in the labels, or you get lost in who are you trying to define, and what happens to the fact that what is the person, you know. And Michael, it's very interesting when you spoke about what did you decide to wear, because I just saw my shirt and I said, oh my God, this is like such a specifically, you know, butch, like, yeah, and it's like and I was like, maybe this is not a right thing to wear for this kind of a conversation. And then I said, absolutely not, maybe, because you know what, I think for me, the identity was all about, am I comfortable in my own skin with what I wear, how I carry myself? And I felt that I did not need to conform to any kind of way of dressing or a behavior, because what I'm feeling comfortable wearing, I will do that, you know. So that's been kind of my story so far.
So Deevan, actually, sorry, I was really keen on asking you this because I know we come from India and I know it's a culture that has a fair amount of, it has defined ideas that need some breaking through, and we've all kind of been doing that. So just wondering what your journey has been like, since you mentioned that you've been in the corporate and the creative sector before you came out and after, and that you've needed to navigate both. And just how has this journey been for you? Because I think society and culture, as all of you have mentioned at different points of time, I think they play a huge role in what we choose to put out there. So Diman, maybe a little bit on that.
So I think I was familiar with the word homosexuality, at least if you're talking about sexuality, at a really young age. And I identified myself as maybe gay when I was about 11, 12, 13, around that time. And I didn't know what is the form of, which is the way I should be and what should I wear? Should I wear makeup? I wasn't so sure which is the direction that I wanted to take. And I think by the time I was 18 and I fell in love and I got like, for the first time, it was just such a beautiful feeling. I thought I had to come out to my parents. I did. It was all very dramatic, but I think there was some kind of acceptance that happened, because it always is dramatic, right? When you come out to parents and, it's one of those big things. But I think more than that, it was just it was, in a sense, at that point of time, I was a bit uncomfortable coming out, because I had suddenly become very open to literature or gay groups, which was all about, this is what it is, this is how it has to be.
Right.
And I didn't really want to, because I couldn't, my aesthetics was not letting me identify with music, with that kind of music, with that kind of dressing and that kind of dancing. So I felt that that's not what I identify with, but still I had to be in the club. So I felt that it was like I was kind of, this whole thing about be gay and you have to be gay, and that is the identity that you need to choose, was a identity that I had to choose at that age. And then later on, that's why it took me time to get comfortable with who I actually am, even with the identity of being gay. And so, yeah, I think when I started working in the corporate sector or even in films, I was not really out. And the moment I would come out to somebody, then there was this expectation that if you're gay, then this is how you should be, this is how you should talk, and why don't you come shopping with us? And the typical things that you hear all the time. And I felt that is where there's so much of an expectation, because now with the way we are open to accepting things, and we are more aware and more exposed to different kinds of people also. So it's very important that people start understanding and do not have a preconceived idea that this is how it is. So, but there is always an expectation. Like for me, it was tough being gay, not because people were picking, because I had to be certain things, I had to do certain things, which was a bit of a problem for me right at the beginning. And then I was just like, what, let it be. Because I remember when I was 21, and this comes with a lot of actually confidence. I don't want to brag, but there was a sense of journey in my own life where I felt that it was my cousin's wedding, and I wanted to wear kajal in my eyes. And I don't know what gave me the courage, but I just felt that I had to do it, and I did it. And I went, and there were people must have looked, people must have seen, but I think there was a very strong sense of, this is how I want to be, this is what I want to do. And I think that was somewhere a big step for me, in which I kind of became comfortable to who I am.
Yeah, I want to interject that I feel like we all pass on a number of dimensions every day of our lives, but we don't typically feel like we're betraying ourselves when we pass, when you don't express yourself fully in some situation. But when it comes to our gender expression and our sexuality and our sexual identities, it does feel like a betrayal of the self. And so it grinds people down a lot more to try to pass on that issue. So I feel like part of where the courage comes from at the wedding is you're just of not wanting to betray yourself.
I would like to contribute the question of I'm sorry, what is Diman?
Diman, yeah, Diman.
Yeah, thinking about like what is gay culture, right? And how is gay culture formed, and also how are cultures in general formed? And I think so often, like particularly gay people and trans people feel that we cannot we can't really be seen as we are through the lens of our ancestors or through our, you know, our family's culture. You know, we have to find ways often to reinvent how we can have family, how we can be seen for who we are, and how we can feel that we belong. Because so often our depictions, the depictions of us that have been in mythology, that have been in ancient texts, are erased, and people pretend that that we are this new phenomenon that suddenly arrived on the earth, when the actual reality is that gender variation has been in existence for as long as humans have been here, and homosexuality has been here since the beginning. And I mean, even within Hinduism, there are stories of different gods changing their sex in order to attract something or someone. And so there's something in the way of like gay culture has been like promoted as this set of, you know, phrases and TV shows and singers and ways of being even as sexual beings. But I think where my work is now is really looking at where are we before the thing that we call gay culture existed, because we're everywhere across cultures, particularly in indigenous cultures.
I just wanted to bring in something. I mentioned this earlier. So Ankush has been working with the third gender community in Delhi since several years. And since summer, you also mentioned that you are working with the third gender community in Italy. Ankush, I'd just love to know, you know, and because we're talking about society and culture, and the third gender is something that's, yeah, possibly existed before we had these terms of homosexuality. And so, Ankush, maybe just a little bit about what, and I know, and sorry, I'm just going to bring this up because the third gender in India is actually considered sacred. Like, we seek their blessings. We, whenever we're at the start of an auspicious occasion, we are happy to have them around with us, and they're considered sacred. But at the same time, I know that they experience a lot of social and cultural difficulty as well. So, Ankush, maybe a little bit about that.
Right. So first, I just wanted to have one point that Samar has shared. So in Hindu tradition, we have got Shiva and Parvati. So there is a picture is Ardhanarishwar, half men and half women. So that tradition is very old in Hindu tradition. The half men and half women. And when I was in my childhood, so I always, whenever I saw that picture, so I was having a lot of questions why this is. There is one picture of Shiva and there is one picture of Parvati, and so male and female. And then suddenly there is one picture is half men, half Shiva and half Parvati. So that question came a lot of time, but I was not having any answer that time. So I just thought, okay, because in our Indian tradition, no one likes to talk about transgenders. There is only it's mostly people just recognize male and female, and we were never taught about third gender. When I grown up and I realized this is the problem, I have to find out what is the truth, and can we question our tradition, why those traditions are. So I focused on questioning and reflection, to question our traditions and to reflect on why this is happening. So once I got a chance to meet one transgender, and I asked a lot of questions because there are a lot of judgments, perceptions towards transgender community. And in my childhood, people told me, okay, please don't go near those people. They are like just create a lot of judgments. So I was having a lot of fear inside me. So I don't know what to talk, how to ask them questions. But in 2008, first time I got opportunity to meet a transgender very closely, and I just listened their stories, and I asked them a lot of questions. How are you? How you feel? Where is your parents? When you meet your parents, I listen a lot of painful stories because they left their house 30 years back because their parents were not accepting them. So that felt me in my heart, how it is possible there is no acceptance So I felt, okay, if I have a lot of questions in my minds, and in our system, a lot of questions people have this question, who is transgender, how they feel. So then I decided, if first I will understand this scenario, and I have listened a lot of stories and asked a lot of questions. And then at the end of everything, I asked that Didi, can I hug you? So I just hugged her, and I just felt everything melt inside me. Oh wow, it's so much of love, so much of selflessness. There is so much of compassion. And she accepted me with full of her heart. So then I thought, there is no two, it's one. It's just created by society, and we all are one, we are equal, and we have same emotions, same feelings. So that day I decided, okay, now I have to take action, and I have to decide what I am going to do for this community, because now I have to do something. And then, because I believe that first we have to be the change what we wanted to see. So then I decided that my first employee of my office will be transgender. So I recruited first employee of my Delhi office, transgender, that is Sanjana Didi. We are so blessed, so loving to have with her in my office. I feel so blessed and so amazed. Every festival, every Diwali and other festivals, she do all worships and puja, and we all sit together, we eat together, we play together. And now today, I feel that male, female, and transgenders, all these genders are decided and by society and created by society. But on inner our heart, we all are one. We have same feelings. So this is what transformed me inside, and I started and then continued to work for this community in Delhi.
Could I say something there, Lahar?
Yeah, I just want to say that Didi means sister, okay, in Hindi. Just
Okay.
Sister.
And
sharing that. Yeah, sure.
Can I
Trevor,
just
go
have
ahead.
one more quick question about terms? Are you using transgender and hijra interchangeably? Do they mean the same thing?
Yes. So in India, there is two words. One is hijra and one is kinnar. So some people, kinnar. Yes.
Inna.
Trevor, yeah, go ahead.
What I loved about this story is really the perspective of transformation that came out super clearly for me, in that once you start unpacking the socio impact of how society has affected a identity marker on you, and when you start unpacking how those markers are transcendent to your existence. So if you start breaking down those markers and starting to see, and exactly your journey with the transgender community was that when you started seeing that your perception and their perception, they've gone through a journey of change and innate work and understanding that their gender is not perceived through your eyes, but through their soul. And I think that once humans start doing that work and understanding and unpacking that gender really is not a fixed point. It's something that you need to work through and unpack for yourself. And if you feel that, hey, I identify as either binary, male or female, then that's fine. And if you feel that you identify within the spectrum, the vast spectrum of various identities, then that's fine too. And I love the intersectionality of how sexuality plays a role on that journey. So we've spoken and touched on sort of gay identity. For me, when I came out as gay, the perception of gay was effeminate, and I think that my parents still see that as a thing, and all the people that I had around my community were drag queens or highly effeminate men, and that was the only example of gay. But when I came into community and started exploring my identity within the gay community, what I found there was a macho masculinism and struggling with the tug between, do I identify as female or do I identify as this machoism that's required to fit in my community. That journey is transformative. It makes you a better human, and it allows you to really be compassionate, not only to people based on the identity markers, but to people just because they're people.
Treyvone, that reminded me of something that I've noticed over the years when I teach gender. I always ask students, when I say masculine or I say feminine, who comes to mind? And they always name actors. And so in the current world, the men who are the most prominent representatives of true masculinity, they're always guys who went to theater school, who worry about makeup, who get dressed up for the stage. It's an irony that, and it's also, I feel like one of the liberations from homophobia has been unlinking sexual orientation from performance. And I don't know what it's true like in other countries or other parts of my country, but in my world, that feels like there are now as many ways to be gay as there are to be straight.
Absolutely.
Radhika, as heterosexual person on this panel, because we have a whole mixed bag here, I know that you have also been holding this question for yourself as a part of your inner growth and inner transformation journey around the balance of the masculine and the feminine within you, as a lot of us have touched on. So would love to hear about that from you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. This has been such a learning experience for me. And what I picked up the quote from everyone else is the clothing, the question that Michael had asked. And I came up with this: clothing is an outward expression of one's inner self. So so in that sense, expression, the outward expression of who we are, is actually so reflective of who we are inwards. And we should bridge, and in a transformative journey, you got to bridge that gap or narrow that gap more and more between who you truly are and what you're trying to express, so that there's no fear. And myself as well, like growing up in India, a very Indian culture and kind of I would say a dysfunctional family. I was raised
so many people.
So many dysfunctional. So I was appreciated actually for my softness and even my shyness. So I was not allowed to raise my voice or speak out or express any anger or discontentment. And therefore right now in my journey, so expressing who I am, regardless of my gender, is very, very critical. And as I think Treyvone had said, it's a perception of the soul, right? He said who you're perceived is actually is an expression of the soul, right? Yes. What you're expressing, yeah, something like that, right? So, and me growing up, I used to actually love to play outside, climb trees, and I was play outdoor activities with boys when they play cricket. So I was actually very tomboyish, but my mother growing up, she noticed actually, and so she would stop me from spending a lot of time outdoors and force me to knit, stitch, and do the things that girls do. So it actually had an effect on my adulthood, because it had a very negative effect of me growing up, and I was unable to become this whole and functional person. So I missed certain traits on how to be functional in society as an adult. So recently in my transformative journey, what I'm trying to do is to balance the missing aspects in me, to balance the feminine and the masculine, and rely more on qualities like intuition, sensitivity, and our sensory body, rather than solely only being very rational or logical or living life through the thinking mind. So yeah, and I think Michael had started it when he had talked about the yin yang, and Summer had mentioned about, and also Ankush, about the Shiva and Shakti. So I resonate with that quite a lot, because Shiva to me, it is important for us to behold that the union of Shiva and Shakti comes into being. And Shiva, in sense, it represents direction, action, and Shakti as intuition, creativity. So yeah, so in that sense, yeah.
Just in the interest of time, just checking in, I wanted our last question for the session to be around reimagining, because I really think that's a very important piece in this. We have to reimagine, or just, a world around us that feels more egalitarian, that feels more empathetic, how do we move towards that? And what can we do?
I don't have an answer to that, but I did notice one of the questions in the Q&A was about raising kids, and maybe we can produce a generation that doesn't have to ask that question. So the two things that come to my mind about raising kids is there's a whole lot of ways to be a boy and a whole lot of ways to be a girl, and let's foster in all children what we traditionally call the masculine and the feminine, and not split things so much. And then the other issue for me is we bring out the lens of gender so quickly. I mean, one thing that I was always struck by, and I'm sure I'm not the first, but you know, what's the first thing the parents say when the baby is born? Is it a boy or a girl? And I feel like there's just, I get it, but there's really no, that's not the first thing, you know, does it have, is it healthy, you know?
Right.
Is the child breathing would be.
Yeah.
So, and it, to me, it's just an example of how quick we are to sex the body, to need to know what sex the body is, and to bring that lens out so quickly. And so I would wish that parents could find a way to only bring it out when it's really, really relevant, like how to wash that part of your body, you know? Okay.
I also think we need to redefine the tropes, right? That females are gentler, subservient, cry, the homeworkers, and that boys are strong and tough. Because I remember on Sunday I was at a rally and we were marching against or for the protection of femme presenting both women and gender non-conforming bodies. And one of the words that I remembered saying was how we need to now train our youth, and even as people, we need to train a softer, gentler man, because from a historical DNA perspective, we said, you've got to be hard, that this toughness to break it and to equalize it, to bring balance, we need softer men. And it doesn't mean that softer is more effeminate. No, softer can just be cry more, be in touch with your feelings, be more expressive. And we need to raise tougher girls or tougher women, that we need that women need to become almost more masculine. And I love what Radhika said in terms of the balance of her finding the nuanced nature between men and women. And I wanted to ask you, Radhika, if I can, just how you express more of your masculinity in a cis-het female's body. How does that present? Because I know that in more of the sexual deviance, being trans, gay, and lesbian, we know how that presents in terms of a feminine gay man or a masculine butch woman. But how do you present your masculinity as a cis-het female?
So I can give you a little example. I created art. I create art, but then I don't know. I can't sell myself. I can't say, hey, look, this is my art. Can you buy it? So for me, there was no action beyond the conception of the idea and laying it out. So I just couldn't make myself go there and sell myself. In lots of ways, I attribute that as going forward and actioning it out as a masculine energy or essence, but which I didn't have it in me. But slowly I had to cultivate it. But someone even mentioned to me, hey, you should find a man. And I said, no, that's not the solution. I have to. So I had to learn, and it's fear. I face fear because it makes me nervous to kind of do something which is outside who I am. But then I also found when I started doing it and reasoning in a certain way, it came as a mindset shift that I had to, when I stepped into the action bit, it was in a way I found it's a gender neutral thing, but I think it's a very human thing that we do in order to function as a whole. So in that sense, I found it very empowering actually at the end, in that sense.
Amazing.
I would like to add one thing about the reimagining or the re-envisioning question, which is that I really feel that humans in general from around the world are way, way more powerful than we think, that we know, that we've been conditioned to believe. I think that the powers that be, the evil forces that control the world have made us think that we are these boxes, that we are inside of these things, and they get perpetuated onto the new people. In thinking about like the possibility of what it can mean to be a human and our power as sensitive, living, breathing, evolving souls and spirits on earth for a certain amount of time, I think that there's a capability that we all have to tap into a deeper kind of listening to ourselves. And I think we can look to when we were children to find that. A little bit of a reference to what Michael was saying. If children, like, we can figure out who we were and who we are essentially by looking at what we were doing when we were children, and finding ways to get back to that kind of innocence and freedom and impulsivity, without a lot of the, no, you can't do this because you're a girl. No, you can't do this because you're a boy, or that's too dangerous, or that's ridiculous, or your imagination is running away with you again, or all of those things that children come into the world with, the wonder and the excitement and the fearlessness are how I envision and imagine the human race, like really kind of addressing and relating to this idea of gender, that there is a place that impulse and free expression comes from deep within us, that we have to believe is there, that we can tune into and listen to and feel comfortable in that. I do think that we have the power and the ability to all do that and not live in a state of fear around what are other people going to think and how are people going to be prejudiced towards me. Because, for the 5 people that are giving you a strange look on the subway car, there's that one person that is admiring you and wishing that they had the courage and strength to express themselves so freely.
I really want to say one thing, which is, I think if I look at the future, I would want to say that dignity is something that every human being should, like, it's a birthright of ours. We have to live a dignified life. And this only comes out of respect, And the other quality, I think, as a race that we all need to have, male, female, I don't know if it is, but they always say to have a nurturing quality is a feminine quality. But I think everyone should be nurturing, because, that's the only way I feel we will be able to, because everything else that is something that goes against it. So it is very future positive. And I think, that is something that I'd like to see the future with.
I just wanted to add a line. For me, the future would be just expression, like everyone else said, is the expression of who you are, regardless of our gender. And that's it. Michael.
I was going to say one, Irving Goffman would say that one aspect of dignity is not putting people in their bodies without their consent. And so if you want to wear what you want to wear on the subway, and other people are suddenly defining you by what you wear, and that's a source of losing one's dignity, is being, we all enjoy being put in our bodies sometimes when we elect to, but when other people do it to you, it removes your dignity, our dignity. Yeah.
I think the question of who am I is very important, and how we can influence our culture, the language, the communication, what to communicate, how to communicate with our children, what is masculine energy, what is feminine energy. So let them decide how to balance, how to create, and not decided by us, that we are telling them that you are a boy, you are a girl. So I am just thinking like a transformation in the entire education system and education curriculum, that how we can create that cultural influence so that everyone can find who am I.
So who we are, it cannot be taught, right? So it's only we find out
Yes,
within our own, through our
yeah.
own journeys, what's missing in us, and that's how
Yes.
we, yeah, great.
And then I feel like the theme today has been who we are, regardless of whether it's a boy or a girl, is much more alike than different. And
Right.
it's only the perversions of patriarchy and culture that make us think we're so different.
Perversions for sure.
I still feel like I have so many questions, and I think, Michael, what you closed with, though I know it felt like a summary, has just opened up a whole lot of new questions
Yes.
for me. And I really
We can go on forever.
I know,
We'll
I
have a part
really,
2 for that. Yeah.
I know, and I think a big question which came up is like, is there really anything like a masculine or a feminine? Like, is that, I know, Michael, you touched on it, but I just want to go so much deeper. But I think we do need to close in the interest of time.
I don't have a summary, but I do want to underline something Summer said about the power of people, and that to find people all over the globe who can get together at the same time and share ourselves,
Yes.
and to discover resonances among ourselves, it's pretty hopeful.
That's powerful.
Yes. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do feel like even just the question of reimagining, and I know we said we don't have answers, but I think we all have shared a little bit of what we can imagine. And I think that's just incredibly beautiful to really begin with. So thank you all so much for being here from around the world and different parts of the globe at different times of the day and the night. And thank you. Really.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.